Welcome to the Sales Whisperer Podcast, Session 6. Say that fast 6 times. Welcome, everybody. This is Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer. Today, I've got Wendy Weiss, the queen of cold calling. Wendy is an author, speaker, sales trainer, sales coach. Recognized as one of the leading authorities on lead generation, cold calling, and new business development. Her clients include Avon Products, ADP, Sprint, and thousands of entrepreneurs throughout the country. She has been featured in the New York Times, Business Week, Entrepreneur Magazine, Selling Power, Inc., Forbes, and various other business and sales publications. That's a mouthful, huh? She's the author of Cold Calling for Women, Opening Doors and Closing Sales, and the Sales Winner's Handbook, Essential Scripts and Strategies to Skyrocket Sales Performance. Hello, Wendy.
Well, hello, Wes.
Hey, thanks for coming on my program. I have been reading your content and tips for many years. I have a little folder here I call Experts, and there's a Wendy Weiss folder. I've got your 30-day action plan, cold calling in the 21st century, cold calling survival guide. I've got all kind of stuff. You probably didn't know I was reading all that about you, did you?
Well, I am honored.
So that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on. You know, you and I, we just connected really very recently about Infusionsoft. You're using Infusionsoft. And obviously with Sales Whisperer, I've done a lot of work with Infusionsoft since 2008. But I always tell people, you know, a big emphasis of my podcast over the last several weeks is getting back to basics, making the phone ring and or getting on the phone, right? What do you do when you actually speak with a prospect? And I think that's been overlooked a lot in the last, really probably the last decade, certainly the last several years with the internet marketers and whatnot. But the phone still works, right? I mean, that's why I wanted to have you on and just jump right into it. You know, why cold call at all? You know, is it old-fashioned? And, you know, I hope you'll agree with me that it still works, right?
Oh, absolutely. It still works. And, you know, Wes, there are actually only 4 ways to generate new business.
Okay.
If you're looking for an opportunity, sales opportunity, there's only 4 ways to get that new opportunity.
Okay.
The first is through marketing. That if you're a solopreneur, you're doing the marketing. If you're in a big company, maybe they have a marketing department. You or someone does some kind of marketing, maybe through your website, email marketing, direct mail, something that gets people to raise their hands and self-identify.
Right.
That's a great way to build a pipeline. The second way is through referrals, that you go to existing customers or your circle of influence and you ask them to facilitate an introduction to somebody else that might have a need of whatever it is you're selling. That's another good way to build a pipeline. The third way is through networking, and that might be face-to-face networking where you're going to the Chamber of Commerce or leads groups or trade shows or conferences. Or maybe you're networking online through social media, like LinkedIn, Facebook. Again, another good way to find opportunities and build a pipeline.
Right.
The fourth way is through cold calling, that you target the prospects that you're interested in meeting and you pick up the phone and you introduce yourself. Now, here's the thing, Wes. The first 3 ways that I mentioned, marketing, referrals, and networking, they are excellent ways to build a pipeline. But they are inherently passive in that once you undertake that activity, you're then waiting for somebody else to do something.
Yep.
If you're marketing, you've got to wait for that prospect to call you.
Right.
If you're looking to generate referrals, you have to wait for that customer to facilitate an introduction.
Right.
The same thing with networking, really, because you hardly ever directly meet the person you want to meet. Usually you network and you meet people that know the other people that you want to meet. So again, you're in the position of waiting for somebody to do something, right, to facilitate an introduction. Cold calling is very direct. You pick up the phone and you introduce yourself. And it's actually the only way to make up the difference. If you need X number of first appointments or X number of opportunities to reach whatever revenue number you're looking to reach. It's the only way to make up the difference between the number of opportunities you're finding from marketing, referrals, and networking, and the number of opportunities that you actually need to hit whatever revenue number you're looking to hit.
Right.
And the bottom line is, no matter where you find a lead, at some point you are going to have to talk to this person on the telephone.
Heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid.
I know, and I keep bringing this up, and I'm going to keep bringing it up with my clients on the podcast. You know, all of the marketing in the world is fantastic and needed, but most businesses, even Infusionsoft, most new clients and old clients using Infusionsoft still have some type of brick and mortar business, or even if they work from home, it's not a 100% online business. They have to engage with prospects and clients, on the phone, set up a meeting at Starbucks, something, right? So that human touch is still there. So you don't think email and social media either have replaced it or ever will replace the need for picking up the phone and prospecting?
Absolutely not. You're making that human being to human being connection when you're on the telephone, and that it's missing in email, it's missing in social media. And you can respond in real time. You can actually hear what your prospect is saying, because the way someone says something can totally change the meaning of what they're saying.
Right.
And so being able to actually hear what that prospect says to you and respond in real time, you're making that connection that human beings need connections.
Right.
And it makes an enormous difference.
Yeah, I remember one of the things, like in English, grammar, whatever, composition, they were talking about, they would break the sentence down, I did not say he killed her, right? He was like, I did not say he killed her, I did not say that he killed her. So I mean, the tone of the voice, right, and where the emphasis totally changes the meaning of the sentence.
Yes, you're saying either somebody else killed her,
right,
or he killed someone, but it just wasn't her.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. It totally changes the meaning. Yeah,
that inflection, I get into that. I always tell people, to get good at anything, you've got to be willing to be bad at it. Right, and until you get good at it. Nobody's perfect at anything we try right off the bat, and it takes a while to have that confidence, so the tonality is there, and you're not rushed. You deliver it at the right pace, and but when people are just getting started, though, to get that experience, what do you do with new people? How do they know where to start calling? Should they start calling that $1 million list right away? Should they call some quote, throwaway kind of leads to get warmed up, or how do they get started?
Oh, that's a great question. And actually, I recommend to my clients, for people that are just starting out, that might be nervous, you do not want to call your $1 million leads. You want to, I call them the C leads. C is for crummy. You divide your leads into A's, B's, and C's, and the A's are the really, really good ones, and the B's are still pretty good, and then the C's are the crummy leads. And you practice on the crummy leads.
Okay.
And when you're feeling confident and you're starting to get results, then you start calling your more important leads.
Well, how do you know who's crummy? Just like calling maybe a smaller type account, or?
Well, this is a really interesting question, because it always kind of baffles me, Wes, that when it comes to the conversation about cold calling, for some reason, everything we know about marketing goes out the window. And so before starting any calling campaign, just like before starting any kind of marketing campaign, one needs to identify the ideal prospect. Who is it that you're trying to engage with? Mm-hmm. And to make very specific parameters about who that ideal prospect is. If you're in B2B, how big is the company? That's employees or revenue? Is there a specific geographic location? Is it a specific industry? Who are you looking to reach?
Right.
And then within that, because it's going to be different depending on what you're selling and what your markets are. But there might be degrees that a certain, maybe your sweet spot is companies with 50 to 100 employees. But you can also work with companies that have 25 to 50 employees. Maybe that's a B. Mm-hmm. And maybe your C's are companies that have 1 to 25 employees. So you have to define what your parameters are, and you need to do that ahead of time. And just like with any marketing campaign, if you do an email marketing campaign and blast your offer out to everybody in the entire world, it's probably not going to work very well.
Yeah, I know Chet Holmes, in his Ultimate Sales Machine, he talked about like your dream 50 or even your dream 100. And I've seen people talk about even your top 200. Make a list, right? I mean, look around, either maybe a place you've never been in, where your competition is strong. Maybe that's your top prospect. Then again, that could be your crummy prospect. If they're in there and they're too strong, maybe that's a long-term goal to break into. But I always tell people too, we overemphasize or we overstress, and we get too stressed out, right? Thinking that people, whatever we say is just going to be etched in stone and we're ruined if we don't do it right. When in reality, you just call them back a month later, they won't even remember you called most of the time. So, I say when in doubt, just pick up the phone and get going.
Yes, I agree.
And the other thing too, they probably have to make this list at night, right? And on weekends. I see too many people surfing the internet or they're on LinkedIn looking for leads, during business hours. And I'm like, that's just an excuse to get out of doing the hard work, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. At a certain point, you simply have to execute. You have to take action. Right. It is about taking action. There is preparation, and with my clients, we do the preparation, and then you have to take action.
Right. So do you have kind of a baseline generic opening or script that people can use as a foundation?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. There's absolutely no such thing as a generic script.
Okay.
Hello, sir or madam. That's what you say has to be relevant to the person you're saying it to.
Okay.
And so there is a certain amount of preparation that does need to go into getting ready to make your calls. Once you've done your homework and you've identified the market that you're calling into, then what are the issues that affect this market that you can help with? And that's what you need to talk about.
Okay.
So if you have different markets that you're calling into, you probably can't say the same thing to everybody.
Right.
Because they probably have different issues. And so the more relevant you are, the better the conversation you're going to have. Another question I get asked all the time, Wes, is, well, what should I say when the prospect says I'm not interested? And, a lot of my colleagues treat I'm not interested as an objection, as though you say something, the prospect says, I'm not interested. And at that point, you have to come up with something interesting to say. That's backwards. You have to come up with something interesting to say first.
Right. So I start off with something interesting and let them respond? Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Would you repeat that? I think I had you on mute.
Accident. Oh, okay. So are you saying I start out by being interesting, and then that leads them to being interested?
Yeah, if everybody that you talk to says, I'm not interested, that means either you're not talking to the right person or you're not saying anything interesting.
Okay.
That's what I'm not interested means. It's not an objection. It means you're not saying anything interesting.
So do you recommend getting started like with a question? Do they lead with their name, their company? I mean, a lot of times I have people, I tell them to kind of get right after it and then, but turn it around. You always say whoever is asking the questions is in charge of the conversation. But is that good in the very beginning? Or do you have to be a little more, calm or passive maybe? I don't know if that's the right word in those opening steps.
Well, you're absolutely right, Wes, in that whoever it is that is asking the questions is in control. However, you have to get to the point that you're able to ask questions.
Okay.
If you're making a cold call, somebody doesn't know you, the two things that person wants to know, they want to know who you are and what you want. So if you answer those two questions up front, then you're in a position to ask questions.
Okay.
You introduce yourself. You need to have a strong value proposition or sentence or two that talks about some kind of challenge that you've identified that you think you might be able to help the prospect with.
Right.
And the template could be as simple as we have a track record of helping our clients, or we have a track record of helping our customers, fill in the blank.
Right.
With how you help. And then you either can ask for the appointment or ask for, I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about fill in the blank. Do you have a few minutes right now?
Right.
Because then at that point you've got some permission to have a conversation to then ask some questions. But if somebody doesn't know who you are or what you want or why you're calling them, you're setting up a struggle for yourself.
Well, and most of the time we get voicemail, right? So what do you recommend there?
Well, my answer to this question, if you'd asked me this a few years ago, I would have said hang up and call somebody else.
Okay.
But today, because it is just so difficult to get people on the telephone, it makes sense to use voicemail as a tool.
Okay.
The chances of somebody calling you back, though, if you only leave them one voicemail, is pretty minimal. It might happen, but that's not the most likely scenario. It does take multiple touches. As we know this from marketing, it takes multiple touches to get people to respond.
Right.
So, we've had a lot of success with clients doing voicemail campaigns. And a voicemail campaign is a series of messages that you leave over time.
Okay.
So you can't wing this. You've got to figure it out ahead of time. And you might do, for example, a 4-call campaign. So you're going to call that prospect once a week for 4 weeks. That's 4 calls.
Yep.
But you also send the prospect, if you've got an email address, you also send 4 emails. And so you're touching the prospect 8 times over a period of 4 weeks. And we've seen a really good response rate from doing this kind of messaging, these kind of campaigns. If you don't hear back from the prospect, but you still think that's a good lead for you, you take it, you recycle it 3 months out, 6 months out, a year out, and you try them again.
Very cool. Well, that kind of talks about, why they don't ever call back. I see this all the time. Most people are not interesting, right? In their voicemail, it's just, hey, this is Wes. I'm with a computer company. We can help you with your computers. Call me. Right? That's nobody's going to call back.
Nobody's going to call back.
So what holds people back, from being better on the phone? You think it's fear?
A lot of it is fear. Certainly this idea of cold calling has been very demonized. And another thing, Wes, that always confuses me, the conversation about cold calling is always so emotional. There are people that love to cold call. I happen to think it's fun. There are people that love to cold call, but then there's this whole other great big contingent of people that hate to cold call. And so the conversation is always love or hate. And here's the thing. Cold calling is not an emotional experience. Cold calling is actually a form of direct marketing. And you don't have to love this. The opposite of hating to cold call is not that you love it. The opposite is that you are neutral. Mm-hmm. Because if you are neutral, you can function. You can do what you need to do. If you're in this emotional tizzy all the time because you have to call people, then that's a very hard place to be. It's very difficult to function there. And if you simply think of it as this is a form of marketing that I need to execute on, and you have a plan and you're prepared, it's not that difficult.
Right. Well, and growing up in corporate America sales, I sold stocks and bonds, real estate, high tech for a decade. Never did I work for a company that gave me all the tools that I needed to be successful. And it's what led me to create the Sales Whisperer back in 2006, was just constant study, and search and, striving to be better. So I know you've got to go here in just a minute. What do you have as a resource that people can use to get better on the phone?
Well, I would like to invite all of our listeners to download my new ebook. It's a complimentary ebook. It's called The Cold Calling Survival Guide. And the subtitle is Start Setting Appointments in the Next 24 Hours. Nice. And you can get that at coldcalling911.com.
Very cool. That's
Cold Calling Survival Guide.
Yeah, and I'll have a link to it as well on my site with this podcast. And I encourage everyone to get it, even if you don't do cold calling that much. Like I personally don't have to cold call right now, but I'm still talking to people. I'm still leaving messages. I still get calls from some pretty, I say still. Now I'm getting calls from bigger prospects wanting assistance. And even though it's not necessarily a cold call, the preparation that goes into handling that call, that situation, because they're still just a prospect, right? And to get in that frame of mind that, hey, I've got something of value, here's my unique selling proposition. Why am I speaking to this person in the first place? How can I help scratch their itch? What is their itch? All that comes from preparation. And so, like I said, the whole reason we're talking is because I found you years ago. And began downloading your stuff and getting your programs, and that's why I have you on the show. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Wes, and I'm really happy that we connected and I could be here today.
Well, thank you very much. I'll let you get on to your next appointment, and we'll set a time, an email, or what have you, and we'll catch up on Infusionsoft as well.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thanks, Wendy.
Bye.
What great advice from Wendy Weiss. Look at that. I'm a poet and didn't know it. I know some of you might be thinking I focus a little bit too much on these initial podcasts on cold calling, prospecting, old school selling, if you will, but it's the fundamentals of any business. I always tell people marketing is just selling in print. If you don't know how to sell face-to-face or over the phone, meeting with an actual live human being, I think it's that much harder to do online. And any business, regardless of your situation, can make money today by being better on the phone. I know the odds, they always say, are stacked against you, yada, yada. But you know what? That's true in anything. In direct mail, if you get responses 1%, 2%, 3%, you can make millions. Well, it's the same with prospecting and making outbound calls. It's not sexy. It's not glamorous. I admit today I don't have to do it, but I did do it. I did it for a decade, and I was good at it. And that's why I was able and have been able to provide for my family as a commission-only salesman since 1997. And it made me tough. It gave me the foundation to build upon. It helps me now with my marketing. So get good at working the phones, speaking with people. It makes you tough. All right. It makes you understand what the true objections are to your offer, which will help you create better marketing, which can help you eliminate the objections from ever coming up in the first place, which then eliminates the need for having to make outbound calls, right? Because you can create marketing that makes sense, that attracts people, that addresses their concerns. So then when they call, it's for a little bit of clarification, it's to make, place the order with you. So that's how I've built my business. That's why I encourage you, listen to this podcast again over and over. Get Wendy's survival guide. I've got the link on my website, session 6, and give it to your people. Hand this to your salespeople. Have them go through it. Have them get better at making calls. But you, as the owner or the sales manager, have to help them come up with a great script that they can use to befriend gatekeepers, befriend receptionists, reach decision makers, leave interesting voicemails, capture their attention when you do reach them, set firm appointments with a mutually agreed upon agenda, and then make the sale, make a fan for life, get referrals and testimonials, and then not have to do that anymore. So thanks again for listening. And remember, you can visit thesaleswhisperer.com and then check out the blog for all the podcasts. And this one was session 6. Good selling. Thank you for listening to the Sales Whisperer podcast at www.thesaleswhisperer.com.